On today's episode, we talk kayak fishing. Specifically, we have 5 tips to make you a more efficient kayak angler, and we have some exciting news. I got a new kayak. We'll also recap the absolute smash fest that the Bassmaster Elite Series anglers put on at Lake Fork this past week, and we answer your questions about bucket list fisheries. All that and more on this episode of Tackle Talk.
Hello, everybody. I'm Bill Dance, and you're listening to Tackle Talk.
This is the Tackle Talk Podcast, brought to you by American Legacy Fishing and Outdoors. World-class fishing gear, unmatched personal service. Now, here's your host, Andrew Hayes.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Tackle Talk Podcast. As always, we are brought to you by American Legacy Fishing and Outdoors. And if you're looking for the best people to order your fishing gear from, a great Midwestern tackle shop that actually cares about you, that wants to take care of you as a customer, there is no other place on the planet I would recommend you look more than American Legacy Fishing and Outdoors. They're situated right there in Evansville, Indiana, right there at the south end of Indiana. They're great folks. They're family owned, and they have great customer service, fast shipping, a great selection of rods, reels, baits, apparel, electronics, accessories, you name it, they've got it over there. But not only do they have new gear, they also have the internet's best selection of lightly used fishing gear as well. If you've had your eye on that Shimano or that G. Loomis or that Daiwa, but you don't want to fork over the coin for it brand new, I've got good news for you. You should be checking that used page often. They have some killer deals on some of the most highly in-demand rods and reels on the internet. So save you some money. Go check out their used section. Become an elite member. That's a great value for like $49 a year, and you get a sign-up bonus right out the gate that makes it a no-brainer. But all year long, you get free shipping with no minimums. You get 10% back on every single order, no questions asked. And by the way, you can use our code TACKLETALK5 to save 5% on the front end. So save 5%, then get 10% back. It's an absolute no-brainer why you shouldn't be using American Legacy Fishing. Save money. That's one of our big things here at Tackle Talk. Anywhere that we can save you a buck, we try to do it. This is a great way to do it. And you're supporting a great family-owned mom and pop shop right there in Evansville, Indiana. So go check them out, www.americanlegacyfishing.com. And as always, use code TACKLETALK5 for an extra 5% off most regularly priced and sale items. Again, www.americanlegacyfishing.com and use code TACKLETALK5. Okay, folks, first thing here, really fast. We got a ton to get to today, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time here, but the Bassmaster Elite Series just wrapped up at Lake Fork in Texas this past week, May 8th through 11th, and you guys know Lake Fork. Lake Fork in May, I mean, it is going to be a smash fest. The last couple times they've been to Lake Fork, especially last year, you had Trey McKinney just leaning on them, century belts, the whole 9 yards, a really cool event last year. This year lived up to the hype once again. So really quickly, your top 10 and reverse order. 10th place, Seth Fighter. 9th place, Jay Shakurit. 8th went to Easton Fothergill. 7th, Wesley Gore. 6th, Tyler Williams. 5th, JT Tompkins. 4th, Koya Fujita. 3rd, Trey McKinney. 2nd, Paul Marks. And 1st place, his first blue trophy, and by all accounts, probably not his last. This is a name that we've had our eye on for years at this point, coming up the college ranks. It is Tucker Smith. Now, if that name sounds familiar to you and you're just like more of a casual fan, it's probably because Tucker Smith and Logan Parks, about, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 years ago at this point, won the U.S. Open, which was a $1 million prize, and they won it as a team there while I think they were still fishing at Auburn. They were tournament partners over at Auburn, a storied record on the college ranks as well. But Tucker Smith wins at Lake Fork this year with a total weight of 127 pounds and 8 ounces. So he beats out second place, which was Paul Marks, last Elite Series tournament's winner. He beats him out by just under a pound, I believe. But a couple quick notes here. One, the staggering amount of like first and second year anglers in your top 10 here. I mean, if you look really quickly, you've got Easton Fothergill, rookie, and then you have Wesley Gore at 7, 6 Tyler Williams, 5 JT Tompkins, 3 Trey McKinney. All of those were rookies last year. And then you have Paul Marks at number 2, Tucker Smith, number one, who are rookies this year. You just have a stacked top 10 full of awesome young talent here at Lake Fork. And the other thing that we should probably point out here, all 10 anglers in your top 10 here on Championship Sunday had century belts, which is crazy. So even 10th place, Seth Fider had 101 pounds and 8 ounces. And a century belt is a big deal. You weighed in 100 total pounds over 4 days. That means you have an average at least of 25 pounds per day. That is not something to scoff at. That is a big deal in the bass fishing world. And all of your top 10 had century belts. I can't imagine what it feels like to weigh in 100 pounds over 4 days and barely crack the top 10. That's nuts. But Tucker Smith is your winner here, 127 pounds, 8 ounces. Congratulations. Just a smash fest down there in Texas at Lake Fork. Really cool event. Go check out Bassmaster.com if you want all of the details on that past Elite Series event. Okay, next up here, we've got some big news, at least for me personally here in like the Tackle Talk / Andrew Hayes fishing universe, I guess. I got a new kayak. So I want to talk about this for a really quick second, and we're not going to go into a full review today, obviously. You guys know how I typically try to do things, and I like to do things, which is I don't really try and do, initial reviews as much as I want to make sure I have time to use something, and I really figure out what I like and what I don't like, and I can be honest with you guys and come back at a later time. I know, obviously, that's not how the internet works. The internet is always like, who can be the first to put something out, right? I'm not really a big fan of that type of thing. I would much rather put some time in with it and then circle back to you all and talk to you about what I like and what I don't like. But I at least want to give you guys kind of a heads up and a really quick rundown here of what I'm going to be fishing out of here for the foreseeable future, why I made the change, and just kind of at least get the cat out of the bag there, because I know eventually you're going to see it in pictures and videos and stuff like that. So I would like to at least talk about it for a really quick second here. So if we want to back up, if you've listened to Tackle Talk for more than like 30 seconds ever, you know that I don't own a boat, but I'm a big kayak guy. And I've been kayak fishing for probably like 10 to 12 years now, I would say. And over those years, I've gone through quite a few different kayaks and made some kayak changes for multiple reasons. So I started way back in the day with an Ascend A10. That was like a blue sit-inside kayak, not made for fishing, just a regular sit-in kayak that I fished out of. And that was my first time owning my own, vessel of any sort and getting off the shore and exploring and learning new water and just fishing in a completely new way. I'd been a bank guy and a wading guy my whole life, but kayak fishing was a completely different ballgame, and that A10 let me take that step into it. And then if you fast forward a few years after that, I sold that A10 and I bought an Ascend 10T, which was a 10-foot sit-on-top kayak, like my first actual fishing kayak. Not very expensive. I think I paid like $500 for it at the time, but a better fishing platform that allowed me to begin taking kayak fishing a little bit more seriously. I fished my first couple tournaments in that kayak. I learned to mod and upgrade a kayak with that platform, all that stuff. So I did that for a few years with the 10T. Then I sold that 10T and I bought a Feel Free Lure 10. And that was my first kind of true larger investment in a kayak. I think I paid $800 for it on Facebook Marketplace. Just a really nice fishing kayak. And I still think if you're looking for a stable paddling kayak that's extremely comfortable to fish out of, that kayak is an awesome choice. And I think it gets overlooked a lot these days with all the new offerings that are out there. But the Feel Free Lure 10 was a great kayak. And then I eventually sold that kayak and I bought an Old Town 106 PDL. And that was my first really expensive kayak. I mean, we're talking, I don't know, probably $2,500. That's very, very expensive to me. But it was my first pedal kayak. So my first kayak that I could move without paddling, with a different form of propulsion. And that was a game changer for me because that was just the next step, right? Covering more water efficiently, and that kayak let me do that. And then I wanted to see what all the fuss was about, so I sold that kayak after a few years and I bought a Hobie Outback. Now, I fish a lot of rivers, a lot of creeks, a lot of small lakes, and since I'm not really a big water guy and I don't fish like the Great Lakes or anything very often, I didn't feel like I needed to go full-on Hobie Pro Angler like most folks do. I went with the Outback, and it was perfect for me, and it was perfect for what I needed to do. But again, it was a step up financially, and it had a different pedal system in it where it uses like the kicker fins versus the bicycle prop and the instant reverse and all of that the Old Town had. But again, it allowed me to keep trying new things. And the Hobie Outback was also the first kayak that I ever owned owned that I decided to put a motor on. So I put a little 24-volt motor on the back of it. Again, changed the game for me. It let me be able to safely navigate water that I was just not able to, maintain my spot in or go by myself and reach before. So that was a great thing as well. But up until last week, that was it. I'd had like 5 kayaks in 10 years, all incremental steps up the ladder. And that was important to me because when I talk about kayaks, I want to have a good frame of reference because I've used all price points and a lot of different brands and a lot of different kinds of kayaks from $300 to $3,500. And that journey has been invaluable to me to be able to talk to you all about kayaks and, what I think based on your situation, what I might recommend or not recommend. But I should also say, I really liked all of those kayaks. Now, I would say I probably liked my Hobie best, but for the price tag, I should like that Hobie best. And then I would say you're probably at like a tie with the Old Town PDL and the Feel Free Lure, just depending on what you want and what you need out of that kayak, the type of water you fish, and what your budget is. But I would say dollar for dollar. Now, again, obviously very different price tags. One's about $1,000, one's $2,500. But dollar for dollar, if you want to just compare it that way, I think those are very close in terms of like their value proposition. And the Ascends were great starter kayaks. They were great on a budget. They were pretty customizable and they were lightweight. They let me, car top. They were great kayaks too. But it's not in my nature to just stay with one thing for too long because I just love trying new things and I get bored easily and I always want firsthand experience with what else is out there. Now, the one thing that we don't do here, right, is I don't, just take, free kayaks from 18 different companies. I don't accept those type of things a lot of times. I've turned a lot of companies down that want to send us free stuff here because the fit isn't right. So everything up until this point, I have bought with my own money, just like you all. And I think that's important too. But that leads us to where we are today. And today I am moving on from my Hobie Outback. So I guess if you're in the Dayton, Ohio area and you're looking for a fully motor ready, foot steering, rigged up, ready to fish kayak, hit me up. But today I am moving in a completely new direction. I'm going with a new brand of kayak that I've never used before, a completely new platform that I'm really excited about, and a new direction for how I want my kayak rig to look and feel moving forward. So I'm going to be rocking a Crescent kayak, and specifically, I went with the Shoaly, and there's a few reasons why. So one, we already talked about, I just like to try new things. That's easy. I can't stay with one thing for too long, even though I loved my Hobie Outback. I think it's time to move on. 2, honestly, I feel like my Hobie Outback was a little overkill for what I do on a day-to-day basis. Now, is it nice? Yes, it is very nice, but it's heavy, it's cumbersome, and at like $3,300 before any of the add-ons for like motors or batteries or electronics or adapters or mounting things or anything like that, I actually feel like I ended up paying too much and I ended up paying for features that I thought I wanted on my forever kayak, but I didn't end up using. Like for instance, the Mirage Drive is a very good example. I wanted a kayak that I could pedal, paddle, and motor. I wanted something that was just like a jack of all trades. Any situation, I could do what I wanted to do with it. And I thought that's what I wanted. But the more I used this kayak, the more I realized the areas that I fish and how I fish, I was using my motor a lot more than I was using my pedals, to the point where I was leaving my pedals at home a lot and just taking my motor. And if that's the case, well, then I'm leaving like $1,000 pair of pedals at home. And instead, now I just have a kayak with a giant hole in the middle where the Mirage Drive should go, that I have that little plastic piece, but water's getting all inside the kayak, and I'm not in a dry kayak that's fitting the needs that I need. So that was like something that I was really like concerned about at the beginning. I wanted to be able to pedal this kayak, and now I don't ever really pedal it. I either paddle it or I take my motor with me, or I do both. So that was something that just seemed unnecessary and I didn't need to pay for. Also, the rudder placement. I feel like I paid a premium for a kayak that had a great rudder system where the rudder is already contained under the kayak, so it keeps the back end of that kayak clean so that you can kind of mount a motor back there or do whatever you want without a cumbersome rudder back there kind of in your way, so you don't have to like offset a motor like you would on the Old Town or anything like that. I thought that was awesome until I realized, again, I don't use that rudder a whole lot. All it really does is get in the way, because the way that rudder is positioned, you can't put any weight on that back keel of that kayak. So when I want to load that kayak, or I want to tip it up, or I want to drag it, you can't do it because all of the weight of that kayak, so if you've got it loaded down, 100 or a couple hundred pounds, are sitting on a plastic rudder that is just going to bend and completely snap. So that was something that, again, I thought I wanted. I ended up paying for it in a very expensive kayak, and in the end, I don't think I really needed. So some of those things that I thought were going to be pluses just kind of became a pain in the tail as time went on. And then number 3, why Crescent specifically? Well, the answer to that one is because I've had my eye on Crescent for probably a year or two now, most notably because Drew Gregory, who we've had on this show before, a good friend of mine, who's a great guy and probably one of the best kayak anglers in the country, is the lead designer for these fishing-specific kayaks that Crescent is putting out. So Drew designed the Shoalie, and he also designed the newest member of the Crescent family, the Smallie, which is sort of like the little brother to the Shoalie that just was released. Drew's fingerprints are all over those kayaks. And that's one of the things that's always bugged me about many of these big kayak brands that I've bought over the years, including Old Town and Hobie, is I feel like there were so many little things that could have easily been fixed on those kayaks if you would have let a true diehard kayak angler be at the forefront of that design process and give them honest feedback during that initial design. So go back and listen to my episodes where I was kind of brutally honest on a review on my Old Town PDL, a review on my Hobie Outback. I was very clear. There's a lot that I love about them, but each one of them had these minor details that just seem like anybody who, again, was a diehard kayak angler probably could have told them to fix. So I don't know if they just didn't involve those guys. I don't know if they didn't listen to them. I don't know if they didn't involve the right people. But either way, I really like and respect the fact that a company like Crescent is saying, hey, Drew, one of the best kayak anglers in the country and a true small water, shallow water, sort of river rat like how I like to fish. I like that they went to him and they just kind of gave him the keys and said, make an awesome fishing kayak with all of the little things that anglers want. So from what I've seen, I think that Drew did that. So I've wanted to try one of these for a while. There's a couple people around here, some buddies that have a Shoalie that I've really kind of looked at and said, you know what, I think that's a pretty cool platform I would like to try out sometime. So I feel like I've got 2 good years out of my Outback. I like it, but I want to move on. I want to keep trying new things. So I asked Drew about the Smallie and the Shoalie, and Drew actually agreed to kind of help the show out here and support us and give us the opportunity to use this Crescent Shoalie, to build it out how I want it, to use it, to abuse it, to speak freely about it, and that means a lot to me. So in full transparency, I have never worked with a kayak company before today. Like I said, I've always bought my own kayaks, cash, just like everything else, but I felt pretty strongly about this one, and I really respect what Crescent is doing. I respect the people behind it. That's not a coincidence that it's someone like Crescent. I think this is a company that I've done my research on, that I've kept my eye on, and they seem like really good folks that are just doing the things that I've complained about for a long time. Like, why aren't you letting actual anglers design these kayaks? There's so many little stupid things on the kayaks that I've bought over the years that just irk me to no end. Drew seems like the guy at Crescent that's saying, hey, let's fix all of those little things. Let's do the little things that make a difference to anglers. That's why I'm going to be rocking a Crescent Shoalie for the foreseeable future. So I appreciate Crescent helping us with the cost of this kayak, for giving us the opportunity to use this kayak and to really be, again, honest and put this kayak through the ringer. And we'll be doing a full review on this kayak. I will do what I always do, which is find the things that I really like, the things that can be improved, and give you an honest opinion on this kayak. But from all of my research, this seems like the direction that I want to go with my next kayak build. I've gone up and up and up and up in price and features and everything over the past 10 years, and I feel like I've tried almost everything, so I know what I need, what I don't need, and how I can streamline this kayak build to fit the type of fishing that I do and take little bits and pieces from what I've learned along the way and make this thing perfect. So again, full review coming down the road, but I wanted to just kind of let you all know before you start seeing it in photos and on social media and stuff. Yes, I got a new kayak. Yes, it is a Crescent. I think the folks over there are doing great stuff and they deserve to be recognized and talked about, and I'm really excited to run this Crescent Shoalie this upcoming year. So just giving you a heads up on that one. Okay, that's the new kayak. The cat's out of the bag. That is done. Now, in honor of this new kayak that we just got and the weather turning nicer and so many people getting the kayaks out and smoking some spring spawners and post spawners, I figured it'd be a really good time to do a good old-fashioned 5-tip episode. And today, it's going to be quite simply 5 tips to make you a more efficient kayak angler. Okay, our first tip here of our 5 tips to make you a more efficient kayak angler is going to be to optimize the layout of the inside of your kayak. And basically what I mean by this, and this is something that took me an embarrassingly long amount of time to learn, is to make sure that everything that you could possibly need from catch to release is within reach without opening or closing anything. That helped me out a ton. Things like scissors or snips, if you need to cut a tag end, if you need to retie, if you need to do anything like that, you need to cut, your bait out of your net because it's stuck in there and you need to get this fish back in the water, like that kind of stuff. You don't want to be turning around, rummaging through your bag to try and find your scissors or try and find your snips. Keep them right there. Pliers, the exact same thing. These 2 things, cutters and pliers, I actually stopped putting in any sort of like storage compartment altogether, and they're now kind of on the deck of my kayak. I tuck them away off to the side in some sort of little nook or cranny, or put a little, loop so I can stick them in and keep them off to the side or something, but they're on like a leash. So I just got a little bit of that kind of like semi-retractable, it's not even retractable, just kind of coiled cord, and then I tied that to a point in my kayak, and that's where like my pliers stay. So I can't lose my pliers because my pliers are strapped to my kayak and they're on this kind of small, tiny leash. The same thing with my snips. My snips are attached to my kayak via a little leash. So I wanted to make sure, and you can go to Home Depot and you can get that stuff super cheap to actually just tie off, or you could use paracord or whatever. You can get really thrifty with it if you want to, but tie off those things that are super important and just keep those up front within arm's reach somewhere. Maybe that means you need to drill a couple holes and you need to install some sort of little pouch or something right there. That's totally going to be worth it to make sure that all of those little tools that you could need are going to be right there. And maybe that's something like, if you're a big wacky rig angler or something, keeping your little wacky rig O-rings right there. Just anything that you could need at like a second's notice that could take time away from making that next cast. Make sure that you have that optimized in the layout of your kayak. Same thing if you like to take a lot of pictures, optimize that. What I did is I made like a little Yak Attack Mighty Mount space right in front of where I sit in my kayak, and I have my camera ready to go right behind me. I don't even have to look. I can just reach behind me, grab it, and I stick it right on that Mighty Mount. There's already an adapter there ready to go, clip, and then boom, I'm ready to hit the button, take a picture, and then put it back. So like little stuff like that, making sure that from the time you hook that fish until you get it in, till you release it, whatever that process looks like for you, whether you might need pliers, whether you might need snips, whether you need your GoPro or your camera or your measuring board or whatever you need, all of those things need to be within arm's reach and laid out correctly so that the time it takes from the time that fish comes into your kayak till the time you let it go is the shortest amount of time physically possible, because that means you're going to make more casts throughout the day. So stop rummaging for the things and the tools that you could need at any given second. Lay out your kayak accordingly. Okay, the next thing that you can do, again, a lesson that took me longer to realize than I would like to admit, is you need to protect your keel. And this is something where we talk about like efficiency, and I know you might think, well, it's kind of a stretch, right? How is protecting the keel of your kayak going to make you more efficient? Because the worst thing that can happen to you out on the water is a hole in your kayak. And the 2 places that you're most likely to get a hole in your kayak are the rear keel or the very front bottom of your kayak. The front bottom of your kayak is one that I feel like gets slept on a lot. A lot of people think of that back keel because that's where you might drag it. You might put a little skid plate back there, or you might put some Kydex, or you might put a, Burley Pro back there, a Bumper Bro, whatever you might want to do to protect that. That makes sense to a lot of people. Okay, that's going to be the one place that I'm really scratching up and I'm dinging and I'm dragging it across the parking lot. Yeah, I might want to protect that. Okay, that makes sense. I'm here to implore you to also take seriously protecting the front bottom of your kayak. Think of how many times you've been in your kayak, you've gone to shore to either leave for the day or to take a break for a second or just to get up on shore to do Lord knows what, right? And you ram your kayak right into the shore, and there's rocks there, or there's trees, or there's gravel, whatever it may be. You scratch up the front of your kayak so much it's not even funny, and I feel like a lot of people forget that. So I would implore you to protect your keel, and that can mean different things to different people. That could be something as simple as like some keel tape, or just something if you're really, really light on your kayaks and maybe you trailer load them or something and you treat treat them like babies, well then okay, maybe you don't need to protect it as much as someone like me does. But if you are like me and you run a lot of shallow water, if you beat the tar out of your kayaks, if you're dragging, you're throwing your kayaks over hills and embankments and trying to get them down to the water that you want to fish, and you're really kind of off-roading with this kayak, you need to protect those two important pieces. Now, you can go online and you can buy something like a Burley Pro Bumper Bro, and you can do it. They're great. They're already molded, chances are, for the kayak that you have, and you just put some marine goop on there or whatever, you slap it on there and you're done. And that's awesome. The only problem is it's also expensive. A Burley Pro is going to run you like $50 to $60 a piece, and that's going to be one for the front and one for the back, if they even make it for your model of kayak. The kayak that I just got, the Crescent Shoaly, they do make a front and a back bumper bro, and it's just like a preformed piece of Kydex that's made to specifically fit your model of kayak, so it makes it super easy. But again, you're paying for that convenience. What I did this past time, and we'll talk about this eventually when we get into the kayak review and stuff, I made my own keel guards. And so I went on Amazon, I bought a sheet of Kydex, and Kydex is this like kind of black plasticky material that a lot of people use to like heat up and then form into certain shapes. So a lot of people use it to make like gun holsters or things like that. It's great. It's also great for keel guards. So you just flip your kayak over, you put that piece of Kydex right there, cut it out into kind of like a little oval sort of shape, and then use a heat gun, and you basically just mold it to your kayak. And then once you get that shape right, you can slap some marine goop on the other side of that. Make sure you wipe it down with some isopropyl alcohol, stuff like that, to clean it off first, and then just adhere it to your kayak. And after about a day, it will have set, and it is good as new. You might as well have just drilled it into your kayak, as strong as that marine goop gets if you do it right. So I think I made both of my keel guards for like $18 total or something like that. Well worth it to protect your investment. But the reason that I think this makes you a more efficient angler is because I've had days on the water where my day has been cut short, or it's been miserable, or I've been very worried about my own, well-being and safety because I've popped a hole in my keel, because eventually that plastic fails if you drag it long enough. So you don't want to have that. Don't have the day like I did years and years ago where I went out on like a 10-mile river float. If Ryan's listening to this, he's going to remember this. This was like one of the most miserable days I've ever had on the water. We are maybe half a mile into probably a 10-mile river trip, and my kayak starts sinking, like actually sinking. And it's taking on tens of gallons of water inside the kayak at a time. And I had to stop probably every 3 to 4 minutes and dump out what felt like 100 gallons of water out of the inside of that kayak. And it was just, you had like 2 or 3 minutes before, and I'm talking, this kayak would have sunk if I wouldn't have got it to the shore every 3 or 4 minutes. I was pushing it to the limit. The water is almost coming over both sides, and then I would panic and get over to the shore and dump it out again. Don't do that. Don't have those days where your fishing is cut short because of something that could have been prevented. Protecting the underside of your kayak, and specifically your front and your back keel, are very, very important to making sure that you have an uninterrupted day out there on the water. Okay, tip number 3 today. This is going to be one that might be a little controversial, but it's something that I think has helped me, and that's to pick a landing side for your kayak. And what do I mean by that? I mean, when you hook a fish and you're getting ready to land that fish, I think anyway, it's beneficial for me to have a preferred side to land that fish on. So for me, I'm right-handed, which means my rod is typically in my left hand and I'm reeling with my right. So that means my net naturally would want to be in my right hand. So I typically try and swing those fish to the right side of my kayak to land. And I've got kind of in the habit where that just feels natural to me. I don't know if some people out there listening just land it willy-nilly on whatever side the fish is on. That's not me. I almost always land my fish on the right side of my kayak. I think standardizing that process has helped me a little bit. There's less errors, there's less mistakes, because I have a better feel for how that is supposed to go and how to get that fish in the right position. That's just me. So basically, when I set the hook, I'm right-handed. So again, the rod is in my left hand, the reel is in my right. Yes, for both casting and spinning reels, you weirdos. That's a topic for a whole nother day, that if you reel with your right hand with a bait cast, faster, but then your left hand with the spinning reel. We don't have enough time to get into that nonsense today. But what that means for me is that when I set the hook, my first instinct is to almost always lean my rod tip to the right. I always seem to want to pull my rod to the right side of my body, almost always. I'm very rarely setting the hook on either type of rod and then leaning my rod to the left. It just feels weird to me. So I almost try and position myself so that I can set the hook and then kind of swing to the right. And so that means my rod tip is pointed right. I'm already naturally going to be reeling and guiding that fish to the right side of my kayak if all goes smoothly, and that is the side of the kayak that I feel most comfortable landing fish on. It's one of those things, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I guess if I had an 8-pound fish and it was dragging me all over the place, it was already on the left side and I wanted to land it over there, sure, I guess. But for me, I seem to tend to want to swing fish to the right. For you, that might be the left, or it might not matter, but this has helped me become more efficient, and I feel like I'm losing less fish because I'm not worried about having, like an awkward feeling landing job on one side of the kayak, because it's almost always the same process and the same feel because, again, I'm landing it on the right side of my kayak. So I think that helps me. All right, tip number 4 here is going to be to set your kayak up to fish standing up both forward and backwards. And this is a weird one, but this is what I learned from watching my buddy Ryan over years and years of fishing with him and kind of picking up little things that he does that have made me a better angler. This is one of them. So Ryan is very careful, and I don't know if he really even knows he's doing this or not, but I've watched him enough to know that this is something that has helped him catch a lot more fish over the years, is that he sets up his kayak so that he can do a complete 360. I see him all the time with his back facing the front of the kayak, and he is facing the complete tail end of that kayak and fishing backwards, standing up on the kayak. And what that basically means is that Ryan doesn't have to reposition his kayak as much as I had to when I was always trying to fish from at least kind of the normal way of facing, which is either off, to the front left, to the straight front, or to the front right, kind of all that field of view that would normally be in front of you while you're standing on a kayak. Ryan just turns around all the time in his kayak. And what that does is that lets him kind of pass an area and turn around and make 3 or 4 more casts at that same spot before he drifts away from it. Or he can just kind of let the current or let the wind or whatever take his kayak wherever it wants to go, and he's not fighting the positioning of that kayak as much as he is just laser focused on where it is that he's trying to fish and make that cast. So for Ryan, and again, I don't know if this is on purpose or not, Ryan has no rods on his kayak sticking straight up most of the time. Most of his rods are at an angle behind him, and what that does, that means that there's no giant 7-foot rods sticking up to impede him casting in any different direction. He can cast over every rod that he's got in his kayak. So they're not quite horizontal. They're not on a rod stage or anything, but the way he's got his rod holders in that kayak is they're definitely backwards at an angle, so he can turn around and do 360 casts. He can fight fish from any direction, and I think that helps him. And so I've kind of taken some hints from him. Yes, I do have some rods that are kind of in my way at certain directions, but I've really tried to get better about trying to fish at any angle in my kayak and not just straight in front of me. I think that has helped me a little bit, and I think especially if you're in a moving water situation, the more casts you can get at that spot and kind of prolong the inevitable fighting your kayak and taking time to turn around or reposition or do whatever, I think you have a better chance of catching more fish. I feel like Ryan presents more casts at the same target than I do because he's able to turn 360 in that kayak. So that's just something that I've learned. Again, not all tips on this show are things that I come up with myself. I learn a lot of stuff from watching anglers and watching people that are better than me out fishing, and this is something I picked up from him. So set your kayak up so that you can fish from multiple directions on that kayak, and don't be afraid to do it because it's going to help you catch more fish. Okay, and then the last tip that I have here to make you a more efficient kayak angler is going to be keep an emergency bag of extra parts and tools that you might need with you. And this is another one that I didn't learn myself. This is something I learned from watching Drew Gregory. And I saw a video of Drew where he said he keeps a bag full of specific tools and small pieces that he could need at any given time to fix anything on his kayak. And that made a lot of sense to me. It was kind of like a duh moment. I'm sure a lot of people do this, but it was like Drew was the first person I actually saw explicitly say, hey man, there's like 12 things that could go wrong on this kayak, I have pieces to solve everything that I think could go wrong during a tournament day. So that was interesting. And we've talked before about keeping like a first aid kit and things for your safety, and that's all good and well, but also keeping the right tools to make sure that you can get back out on the water if you have a little mishap. And since I saw that clip from Drew, that advice has saved me a lot of headaches. So for me specifically in my setup, I keep a really small bag that has a couple things in it. First, I have two 10mm wrenches. And the reason that I have those is specifically to solve issues with my motor or my motor mount. So if something comes loose, like the steering triangle or something, and it's not quite working right, anything that's on the shaft of that motor, I have that whole motor basically set up and ran on 10mm nuts and bolts, so I can fix just about anything back there with those two wrenches if something goes wrong. And the reason I have two is because there are certain parts of things that are on the shaft of that motor shaft where you have like two 10mm things you have to hold at the same time to loosen or to tighten. So I have two of them just in case. So I can use one on one side of like the nut, the other side on the head of the bolt, and I can tighten or loosen whatever I need to. So that gives me some peace of mind in case something would go wrong with my motor. It also lets me access my prop if like line or something gets in there that I need to loosen and kind of get out of there and keep my motor and my prop running efficiently. I also keep a few extra 10mm nuts and bolts in there just in case I need to replace anything or I'm back there fiddling with something and I drop it in the water. So just a couple like $2 Harbor Freight wrenches and a 99-cent bag of nuts and bolts can be very, very helpful and also very cheap to make sure that you're keeping in the kayak in case something happens. I also keep a little roll of electrical tape, and this is in case I have the very, very off chance that I accidentally splice one of my power wires or something wonky like that. And while I know it's not a permanent fix, that's at least going to let me, use my pliers I have in my kayak to strip those wires, and then I can twist them together, and then I can use the electrical tape to hold them in place. So at least I'm good for the rest of the day, or at least to get back to the truck or whatever I need to do in case of an emergency. An 80-cent roll of electrical tape could end up saving your day. I also keep a little tiny bag of like little tube of marine goop in there in case I accidentally were to pop a hole or, get a little crack in my hull or something like that. Again, it's not a permanent fix, but in an emergency, if I do have a little bit of a leak or something, I could pull my kayak to the shore, I could goop that hole, I could let it set for a little bit, and then I can get back in and finish my day and go catch some fish and get my kayak back to the truck. Little stuff like that is all I'm talking about. So like if you run fuses in any of your electronics, then an extra fuse or two in there would be a good thing to keep in that bag. A really good example would be when I had my Old Town 106 PDL, something that you would have to do sometimes is unscrew that prop nut to loosen the prop to get weeds out of it. And one time I unscrewed it too far and the prop nut fell off. Well, either you can have an additional prop nut in there so that you can, replace that if you drop it in the water, or you can buy a floating prop nut, which is what I did. But even then, you still have like the off chance there's a little centering pin or a shear pin inside that prop that broke on me one time that I really, really wish I would have had another one on hand to just slide in there. And I probably could have, made a couple shear pins to fit that for almost nothing. We're probably talking like pennies to make, 5 or 10 of those just to keep with me. That would have saved my day that day. So little stuff like that. Keep that kind of stuff with you. They're usually very cheap. They take up no room, no weight in your kayak, but it could save your day if something happens on the water and get you back to fishing, or at absolute worst case scenario, get you back to shore or your vehicle or whatever it may be so that you can safely finish your day. So there you go. There's 5 tips this week that hopefully make you a more efficient kayak angler. I would say number 1, optimize the layout of the inside cockpit of your kayak to make sure those little things like snips or pliers or things like that are within reach and they're also leashed off so that you can't lose them. I would say number 2, protect your keel. That means front, that means back. Even a little cheap piece of Kydex and some marine goop can go a long, long way to make sure you don't have a catastrophic day out there in the water and you're protecting your investment so that you can keep fishing. I would say number 3 we talked about today was pick a landing side of your kayak and try to stay with it. For me, that's the right side of my kayak that I typically land all my fish on. That seems to help me be a more efficient angler and land more fish and have less problems getting those fish in the kayak. I would say number 4 is set up your kayak so that you can fish standing in multiple directions, and don't be afraid to fish in multiple directions because that will make you more efficient. And then number 5, create an emergency toolkit with the important important pieces and tools that you can take with you to make sure if something does happen on the water, you can quickly fix it and get back to fishing. So those are 5 things that I think, again, in my opinion, will make you more efficient out there and hopefully help you catch more fish from the kayak. Okay, and finally here, really quickly, we have time for like one mailbag question. I'm going to pop one open here. Let's jump into one question here. I've got one from Brent, and he says, "Hi, Andrew. Me and my 7-year-old son, Dakota, are huge fans of the show. I really appreciate how family-friendly it is and the questions he asks after each episode. I have a 2-part question that might be a little too long to answer, but here we go. What are your 5 bucket list bass fishing destinations inside the United States? And then part 2, what would be your 5 bucket list destinations outside of the United States? I'm not asking for specific spots, but regions or states would be cool. I'm heading to Florida to knock off 2 of mine this year, tarpon and shiner fishing for largemouth. Thanks for the great podcast. Have a great day, Brent." Ooh, okay, this is a fun one to end it on. I would say, okay, let's start with inside the United States, I think. So inside the US, these are going to be in like no particular order, but right off the top of my head, I would say number 1, I do want to go down to Florida somewhere in like West Palm Beach or Miami, and I want to fish those canals. I'm a small water guy. That looks awesome. There's all of these really cool exotic species just swimming around in random roadside canals. You can catch peacocks, cichlids, clown knife fish. I think that would be so much fun to just catch these like fish that look like they should be in an aquarium, and they're just right off the side of the road for anybody to stop and fish. I think that's awesome. Number 2, I would say I want to go to Texas in like the spring, like Lake Fork we just saw with the Bassmaster Elite Series, and have that true Texas fishing experience. I think that would be awesome. Going to a place where you know that any cast you make could legitimately be a chance at like an 8 to 10 pound fish. That is something that we do not have the luxury of having around here, and I can't imagine a full day of just the tension knowing that you are around that big of fish and that quality of fish. Number 3, I would say, this is going to sound stupid because of how close I live to it, but Lake St. Clair is on my bucket list. I've never been to Lake St. Clair, and I only live like 3 hours away from it. So I'm 100% going to change that this year, but it's definitely, at least as of the time of recording this, still on my bucket list. And then I'm going to go number 4. I do also want to go back down to Florida. I'd say I probably want to do like the saltwater slam. I want to catch snook and redfish and speckled trout, even tarpon I think would be awesome, but I know that's not, at least I don't think that's in the saltwater slam. I think the slam that they call it down there is like snook, redfish, and speckled trout, but tarpon would be awesome too. And then for number 5, let's go with somewhere in like the upper Midwest, like Minnesota, and just do a lot of lake hopping around those like thousands of inland lakes they have up there. I think that would be really, really fun. Just, again, I'm a big smallmouth guy. I'm a Midwest guy through and through, and I think that seeing what the Midwest actually has to offer would be a whole lot of fun. Outside the United States, I guess I'd probably go like the Amazon for peacocks. That would be number 1 for sure. I would go to Europe for like jumbo perch or zander. Those are basically, they're 2 kind of species we have here in the United States, except theirs in Europe are on steroids. The perch are way bigger, and zander are basically just giant walleye, so I think that would be awesome. Then I'd probably go somewhere like the Bahamas or down that way to fish for bonefish. That always looks so cool when you watch videos of that. And then I would say like Seychelles, I think is how you pronounce it. It's off the coast of Africa. It's where a lot of folks go to catch giant trevallies. That would be cool. And then number 5, I'm going to be boring here, but I would just go like Canada, somewhere completely remote and untouched, and go up there and fish, hopefully for some smallmouth. I think that would be cool. All right, everybody, that is today's episode. Thank you guys so much for listening. I appreciate you all. As always, go find us on the internet, tackletalkpodcast.com. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram at Tackle Talk Podcast. Shoot me an email if you want to chat, tackletalkpodcast@gmail.com. And we'll see you right back here next Tuesday for another brand new episode of Tackle Talk.
Thank you for listening to the Tackle Talk Podcast. Tackle Talk is produced by Andrew Hayes. Copyright 2019. For more, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.